Hello everybody, what's going on? My name is Simo and welcome to How I Made, where I'm going to show you how I made my track. Take a minute here. Let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so if you missed any of the previous videos on how I made in the music section, there will be a playlist link in the description where you can check out the previous episodes I've also done. And so if you want to check those out and learn a little bit more about some other tracks that I've made, then you can definitely do that. But for now, we're going to get started with this. So let's go ahead and talk about first thing first, how I actually cover this. And basically, it's separated out into three distinct parts. It's separated out into arrangement elements and goals, but covered in reverse. So, it'll be goals, elements, and arrangements, I guess. Then we're going to go into sound design, and after that, we're going to go into mixing and mastering and covering a particular concept or topic about those things. Now, I do want to make one little bit of adjustment here, and that's basically that with sound design, I used to go directly into how I made specific sounds and things like that. I'm not going to cover that so much anymore, but I'm going to cover more from the angle of how I do mixing and mastering, which is covering a specific topic in relation to sound design, and I'll use different sounds that I've made to kind of illustrate those points. And it may also cover, in kind of at least in some kind of detail, how I made those specific sounds. However, with that being said, if you guys want to have access to these sounds and the project file as a whole, that's something I really want to do for you guys, is give you the project file as a whole. So if you are interested in having the project file, looking at the specific sounds that were made, I will give you the project file that I actually have used. Obviously this it's separate copy and stuff like that, but the project file that I've used in order to produce the track. And so there you go. But let me know if you guys are interested in that, and I'll figure out a way to kind of try to get that working. So in any case, let's go ahead and jump right into the goals. Let's go. Alrighty, so when it comes to the goal of this track, it really came down to, like, from what I remember, it actually came down to listening from an old, or at least an older Mr. Bill track that I had found out about a couple years afterwards, and it was called Peaceful Beginnings. It was on his LP IRL, or was it? Yeah, IRL. It was the LP name. And the song Peaceful Beginnings was very much so the inspiration for this particular track, as I will show you just right now. So that's good enough there. That's basically kind of the inspiration, and as you can hear in the original, well, not really so much original per se, but you can hear in my finished track for this is basically borrowing the same concepts with the strings and things like that as such. Including that bell sound that you also hear in the Mr. Bill track too. I figured I would basically take that concept and make my own track with it. However, though, this project file that you're seeing right here is not the original of this. It's actually something that basically started off as a different kind of entity in of itself. And what ended up happening is that I initially wanted to make this track more of a halftime song. And that didn't, after some due consideration, I basically changed it to more progressive house that does incorporate halftime in it as well. But it originally started out like this. So there you go. It's pretty much the gist of that, and that was the fourth demo of that particular thing right there, and I liked that. I really did, and I loved the melodies and the vocal chops and everything like that. I loved it all, but I felt like I could really do a lot better. And after listening to that and what was in my head, um, which, when I listened to it back, I was like, this would really be a good house track, actually. I decided, you know what, let me do that. Let me refocus my mind into a house track for this song and make it into something that's a lot better production, because I had made this song, like I had made this attempt like back in 2016 apparently, at least according to the dates, when it was like created and modified and stuff like that. Um, Made this back in 2016, and obviously 2018. I've improved a whole lot since then, and I just had new ideas about how I wanted to approach it, and overall, I think I'm really glad I did it like I'm doing it right now, because so far this is much better. Way better in my personal opinion. Now, one of the interesting things about this particular track too is that you notice what the original the original version of this, it was way longer. It took a lot longer to get to the point, and I will discuss actually a funny story when we get to the arrangement and element section. But essentially, I've sped it up once I basically got to this point right here. So there you go. Now, that's basically the goal of it, really. In simply put, I basically had an inspiration from a Mr. Bill track, had a first take, took some time off, decided to really wanted to finish this track, but really decided, you know what, I'm gonna reconstitute it for something else. Ended up doing that, and this is what I got. So there you go, and it's a lot of fun doing stuff like this, and so yeah. Now let's move on to the next section of this first part, and that is basically covering all the elements in this particular song, which there is a lot. As I was actually going through trying to list off the things, because I don't like, I don't reel off a script when I make these videos, because I don't feel like that's it takes too much time and there's too much detail and stuff like that. But I do make a lot of notes, and I kind of list them all out in a separate notepad file that you can't see right now, because haha, why would I want to show you that? But I was going through this all, and oh my gosh, there's so many elements. So I'm gonna take my time with this a bit, and I'm actually gonna do just a proper rundown of all the elements, because there is quite a bit. So the first thing is, most obviously, the very first thing you hear in this particular song is what I refer to as the long strings. They're kind of like the drawn out long strings that you hear in the song. Just those things right there. And really, it's just like I don't know, just a thing. It's just a chord progression that I came up with that I thought fit pretty nicely with the idea that I had in my head originally. And yeah, there you go. There is some, you know, you can hear, like, I don't know if you're listening to headphones or you're listening to speakers. Depending on if you're listening to headphones or speakers, you're not going to get the entirety of everything because I use some weird effects, like some weird stereo effects. I've noticed that if I listen through like my like canned speakers or some other or like my phone speakers or something like that, the stereo effects doesn't, like, not all the stereo effects come through. So to show you what I mean, like there's this effect called Stereo Shaper that I use, and just to get like a weird effect that you hear Mr. Bill's thing as well. And it doesn't come through with pure mono sound, so I don't know if you guys can hear it, but basically that's that. It kind of shows itself there. But in any case, though, that's basically that first thing. Then next thing we have the most awesome bell ever. Not really. It's just simply a sine wave pluck. I'm just, you know, I don't know. It's really not that hard to make. It's just there's a little bit of complications, but whatever. I did not mean to do that at all. So there you go. Just stuff and things. I don't know if you want to, whatever. Anyway, that's just a sine wave bell, or at least a bell with some harmonics and stuff like that. And yeah, it's just there. You can literally do the same thing with just a sine wave and have a volume envelope and some reverb in your set. And after that, we have, of course, the vocal chops, which I would say is essentially the main element of the song. Fun stuff as well. Yeah, so there you go. And like I said, this is originally drawn out from the thing. You notice with the original demo, there was some differences in terms of how the vocal chops were constructed, and or at the very least sound, and it has to do with the actual patch that I've used for the vocal chops and everything like that. Not really going to get into that too much, but at the same time, though, there was some differences made with that. After that, according to my notes, we have these short pluck strings, and we have two versions of them. We have a multi version, and then we also have a single version. The single version is, I believe, it plays somewhere around here. I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. Short strings. I think this is it. Yes. That's the multi version, and then we also, like I said, we have a single version too. Now, the reason why I have the single and multi version is purely just so just to kind of differ, just to kind of make there's a different impact with different parts of the drop and stuff like that. The multi version is when things really pick up, and the single version is when the first drop kicks in. Because when the first drop kicks in, it's essentially just like an empty, you know, like you know, I don't know if you guys remember the track "Animals" by Martin Garrix, or any kind of song with that empty kind of sparse drop. But that's essentially what it was trying to go for. Right? You just notice everything just kind of cuts off, and having that only single stringed instrument after hearing the epic, legendary multi-stringed instrument there, like the short plucked ones, but with like multiple of cellos stacked together. I think it's cellos, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, cellos stacked together. It kind of just leaves that. It just adds to that extra sparseness that you hear in the song, versus having basically the same thing repeat over and over again with the exact same one. So there you go. So you get the short one, you get the short pluck strings of a multi and single. Then of course we have the piano, which I play. It starts really right over around here, I think. It's basically playing the exact same melody as the vocal line, and there really is literally no difference when it first starts playing it, but then it starts going into more of a solo aspect as you get to the third drop, well, the third part, and well, like part C of the first drop. So there you go. Fun stuff. Now, that's basically the piano. Like I said, there's a piano there, and that's really it. Then finally, we have one more melodic element that I do want to introduce you to, and it is actually some choirs, which you may have not known there is actually choirs in this track. I actually forgot there was choirs in the track because you can barely hear it, but there you go. If I can play it. And for some reason, it is not playing the choirs that I have set out for it. I don't know why. I really hope this is not a glitch. There we go. It's just, literally, it's just playing the same one as the long strings, and that's really it. So, nothing spectacular there. And yeah. Now, let's go on to the basses, which, oh gosh, this is kind of where I started being like, there's a lot. Like, look at all that purple there. Look at all that purple. You know, for being Nomad from freaking Borderlands. You see, it's actually not as much as it looks like, because most of it is actually repeated a lot, and a lot of it is actually variations, and most of it and the variations are really actually just purely for the I guess you could say the actual rhythmic elements of it. So you notice that I have a lot of like with just the pure sub bass right here. You notice I have 16 triplets, and then you got sub bass, like eighth triplets, and then you got just bar, like the sub bass bar, and then you got regular sub bass, which is a flat signal. Basically that's essentially the name of the game when it comes to the basses. There actually isn't that many basses, but there is quite a few, and most of it is really purely variations on a rhythmic sense. So let's go ahead and break it down. We got basically, like I said, we got the pure sub bass going on and nothing much else. So by the way, if you're not listening to headphones, you probably won't hear it. So there you go. This track is an E. It's a still fairly high key, but it's also not being played at the highest level it could. So there you go. But it might go, but when we get to A, it might get a little higher. I don't know, whatever. But that's the first one. Then we have the next one, which is called Comb the Water. This I essentially use as my Reese bass, pretty much. It's just a really old Reese kind of sound that I made before. It is nothing super spectacular. In fact, it actually is. Let me get rid of all the effects here. There is it's like a watery sound, but I use it as a Reese bass by low passing it and essentially just making it sound more subtle in that regard. Oops. So after that, according to my notes, once again, this is where we actually start to get into the fun sound. So we have this thing called Almost Android. I made this particular sound a long time ago, and I don't remember exactly how I made it of any kind, but I can tell you for sure that it does utilize a lot of different cool stuff with the phaser. I'm not going to really get into it because we're not in the sound design yet, but that is a thing that is there. Why is it not playing that? What the freak? You should be playing. What is wrong with you? There we go. So yeah, almost Android. Then we have this other one called Future Bottles, which I don't know what the heck that kind of name was, but yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's kind of that sound. Then we have another one called Yeah Boy. Literally, to me at least, it literally sounds like it's saying yeah boy. I don't know. You mean you gotta kind of slow it down to kind of really hear it, but if I slow it down a bit. So. Yeah, there you go. Fun times. We'll put this back to 8th so it's actually in sync. But that's pretty much that sound there. Then we got another one called I'm Angry at You, which, I don't know. I have to actually, load it up, but yeah. It's just a filler sound. It really is not anything. I don't even know how I made that sound. Then we have one which I don't know what the freak this was, but apparently I didn't name this one, and it must be a variation of something else. But using the triplets there, and I don't know. I don't know what it is supposed to be. I'm just calling it Serum 2 number 2, which that's totally original. Yes. Then of course we have another one. One of the last ones in the sound design section. We have this one called Machines Playing Rough, which is actually it's number 2 actually, but it is a variation of a unreleased track where it's a variation of a bass sound from an unreleased track that I have yet to really even discuss, and you will see it later this year. Just gotta finish up on some mixing stuff with it and kind of finalize the artwork. But essentially, it's like a really wild idea that I had with using phaser, unison, and volume envelopes or LFOs, really volume LFOs, but utilizing both A and B to kind of do it. So there you go. And we also have another one that's a variation of that one, which where in the world? Oh yeah, 26. For some reason, this one actually wasn't routed to the master sound design thing, so I don't know what the heck happened there. It's actually utilizing a lot of its own separate LFO thing, so there you go. But yeah, just a variation of that one, and that's all the sound design stuff there. Let's move on to the drums, and the drums for the elements in here. It's actually the drums are more simple than I thought it was initially, because like with the basses, there's just a lot of variations. So we have this kick. Hold on, why isn't it? Oh yeah, that's right. Duh. Not playing any of the sounds, more like you don't have them loaded. This is the main kick that is used. There's nothing else really about it other than some stuff going on here. But there is a variation of it where basically the volume envelope, there's a separate volume envelope that I use for volume shaping on drums within the Fruity thing or whatever. I don't know what it's called, sampler, I guess. I don't know. But basically I just shortened it up a bit. Compare that to that. It has a longer tail. And I have an even shorter one for when I do the rapid kicks kind of thing. And this one is really tiny. Basically just gets rid of a lot of the bass too. Like I said, this is the reason why I have these variations on these kicks. Purely just so that I can do the rapid kicks thing. And also if I want to introduce a particular section where there's not supposed to be a lot of bass with the drums present, or at least with a kick, I basically use that. I use that part just before the second drop, I think, which I believe is located somewhere around here. Or no, right here. Yeah, it's playing this. It's playing the one with the shortest tail, with the one with no bass on it. So there you go. Now after that we have basically a lot of snares essentially, and a snap. And the snap is it's just the snap, nothing special about it. So there you go. We also have another one, which is the snare clap. This will use for like basically the snare, or the clap sound that you hear in the drop. Oh gosh, I am like stuffing things. So there you go. It is essentially a high passed snare. So, but it has clap like properties, and I enjoy that. For some reason, there's this one called halftime snare. I don't think I ever use it. I don't think I ever do. I think I initially wanted to use it, but I didn't like something about it, so I just never did. Because when I went through like all the drum patterns and stuff like that, I couldn't find a single use of me using it. So there must have been something about it that I didn't like, and decided, yeah, I'll just leave it there and scrap it. But when we do get to the proper halftime sections in the second drop, for example, we do switch over to an actual metalized, like in terms of like, you know, that kind of ring sound, like that kind of sound right there, version of that. And like I said, it plays mostly in the second drop there. So there you go. And we got 3 versions of this. We got that one, and of course the one previous, and then we also have this one. And that's really just to add variation, really, not much else. And finally, we have the awesome, almighty, amazing Prida snare. It is so awesome. You have to hear it. And you'll be blown away when you find out it really, actually, is totally not a Prida snare, actually. It's actually really not a Prida snare. It's, I actually made it into a Prida snare. And when I was looking back through all the samples, I was like, wait, hold on, this wasn't a Prida snare? Like, what do you mean? And it's actually this sample right here. The AU5 Snare Tight 13 from the Break Tweaker pack. Essentially turned it into this. Literally turned it into a Prida snare, and I love it. It's so good. I forgot I did that, but yeah. And I only really used that sound twice, and that's really like before the first drop and before the final drop. So, there you go. And of course, we have to mention the final thing, which is the cymbals, which nothing's too fancy about it. I mean, really, cymbals I kind of regard more as a filler, like high-end filler than anything else, but can be used rhythmically too. And that's kind of just how I regard a lot of drum stuff, really. It's not meant to be that complicated. Although I will say, if I do have the snares of the cymbals in there, I will do complication. I will mention though, in terms of how the snares are laid out here, I actually don't do this whole methodology where I list out all the samples in as a sample and basically, you know, route them into the own mixer insert. I actually just use a patch now and basically use SliceX to kind of do that, and use MIDI clips to essentially organize them and whatnot. It's a little bit easier, a little bit more practical, and I don't have to, you know, arrange all these effects just to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So there you go. And over and over and over again. So that's basically all the elements. Let's move on to now. I told you it was a lot of elements. But let's move on to now the final part of the first part, and that is the arrangement. The arrangement is actually nothing but all like as I was going through the entirety of everything here, it is literally nothing but 16 bars. There's no 32 bar section. I mean, I guess you could technically say there's a 32 bar section in terms of like if you were to combine them together, like the intro. But I don't really think about it like that, because there's some distinct parts in some intros, and there's also some less distinct parts and what, I don't know. It's just, but you'll see what I mean. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So we get this first section right here when it comes to the song, which is the very first intro. It's the very first 16 bars. You hear the long strings with the bell, and then you introduce the drums and the vocal chops, and I did not mean to get rid of that at all. So you got that. And then, of course, it moves directly into, I will say, part B of the intro. That first part was part A, this is part B. So there you go. Then we move on to, after that, finally the breakdown, first breakdown. This is where we get introduced to the dun 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 dun, that kind of thing. And then once we are finished with the breakdown and the practice snare, just like, this was like, what's up, bro? And then, you know, you get into the empty sparse drop right here. So that's the first drop. There is I would consider this part to be part A. There's like no cymbals here. It's as empty and dry as possible, and then slowly gets brought back up. Now, you can't really hear the cymbals too well, but I play it. And then, you know, low passes back into nothing. And yeah, the fun stuff. But then it slowly builds back up a little bit. You know? That's kind of the part A of the first drop. Then we got basically part B, where it really kicks into overdrive. And then after that, next 16 bars, like I said, it's really nothing but 16 bar stuff. Just variations of length of different 16 bars for each section. But that was part B of the 16 bars there of the first drop. This is part C. Now, I personally consider this section more of like a downturn into the breakdown. It's not really so much of a extension of part B where it's like continuing the energy. It's more so just trying to calm it down and lead in directly into the breakdown of the second breakdown of the song. Let me just hear this freaking awesome. I don't even remember how I made this thing, but I love this melody so much. I just love the way that sounds. It's so cool. That fast-moving ARP stuff with the sub bass, oh, it's so good. Anyway, enough of me nerding out on my own stuff. Let's go ahead and go into the second breakdown, which is this thing right here. Again, going into the sub bass lacking kicks, and then it builds into the second drop. Which the second drop is actually really short. It's I think it's only 16 bars total. Yeah. It's literally only 16 bars. There is no, like, you know, part A, part B, part C, part F. Nothing like that at all. It's just flat 16 bars for the second drop, which is kind of interesting looking at it in retrospective there. But it does flow, so there you go. There is a funny arrangement thing I wanted to tell you about that I actually kind of that I forgot as well. Originally when this song came out, when I first worked on the remake of the song, there was at my job at the time, there was a person that was basically delivering essentially packages and mails and stuff like that for the place that I work at specifically. It's a military clinic that I work at, and basically one of the people that was delivering the stuff, somehow I managed to get her phone number twice. I don't know what the freak. She was kind of cute and whatnot, so I don't know. I guess I had a crush or something. But I asked her, what do you think of this song right now? Like, it was basically an early demo of this track, and essentially what ended up happening is that I basically she basically got the response that this song is cool, but it's taking too long to get to the action. And I was thinking, oh well, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. So I ended up changing it and making it shorter. So there you go. That's the reason why everything is 16 bars and not 32 bars, yo. Ho ho! So anyway, let's go into the next part, which is, I think, the second drop. Yes, the second drop. That's what we're going to say. We have the second drop here, which actually starts off with a false start. And what I mean by full start is that if you listen to a lot of like dubstep or just kind of bro step type genres in general, you'll notice that what they tend to do is that they start off the track like when they do the drop. This happens a lot with like the second drop actually in particular. But when they first started off, they'll basically started off with no really drums going on, and it kind of just like it makes you think, wait a second, did the drop really just drop, or did it really just not drop at all? And then like about a bar or so later, then it'll actually kick into full gear. And that's kind of what that sounds like here. That's exactly what I decided to do. And so that's kind of what that happened there. And I did it again on the ninth bar as well. Just to kind of give a little bit of a variation on that too. So false starts are really cool. They throw off the listener hardcore. I remember when I first listened to dubstep, I'm like, wait, what the freak is going on here with this arrangement? I mean, it's kind of what my mind was thinking when I first heard the full start in electronic music. It just threw me off way off base. And it wasn't until I started producing music and actually learning about the arrangement of EDM tracks in general that I started realizing, oh, this is what they did. And it took a while to get to that point too, so there you go. It really throws the listener off pretty good, but it's a good way to add variation and just surprise the listener as well. False starts are good stuff. Definitely do that. So then after that we get into the breakdown, which this is where it actually starts to modulate and change different keys. So the starting key of this song was an E major, and we go into basically F, and then F sharp, or I guess G flat to be more specific or precise. Yeah, I don't know. I work in sharps. And then we go to G and G sharp, and then after that we finally hit the final key where it stays for the end of the track. We go to A major, yay! And that whole section was basically 16 bars, split it up into 4 different sections, and basically each key modulates up once. And it just does that, I like doing that a lot. I like changing keys a lot. I don't know if you guys have noticed in my music, but about, I would say, 3/5 of my music contains some type of a key change. And that's kind of how I like doing it. I just really do. I think the EP, the most recent EP that I have, which is Content with Apathy, which by the way, How I Made will be coming out for that next year, or sometime maybe towards the end of this year. I will definitely do that, so keep that in mind. But I think for that one was probably one of the only ones where there wasn't a tremendous amount of key switching. There was some tracks that did that, and there was some tracks that kind of went downward as the outro came into being. But there's really only one track that has a solid key switch. But other than that, in some other songs, and most of the time I will do a key change of some description, and I love doing that because it's a very simple way to change the song without having to worry about changing the song, if you know what I mean. Like it's like I've heard it described as a key change as basically being like a switching of a color palette with the character. Like, yeah, it's the same character, but it's just a different color palette. But for me, it doesn't feel so much like that. Like if you were to switch, like for example, if I don't know if you guys played Melee or whatever, Super Smash Bros. Melee, but Mario, he had obviously had the original color palette, but then you could switch him to Wario's colors, but even though it was still Mario, you know what I mean? So a lot of people, they tend to think of key switches like that. I don't tend to think of it like that. I think of them more as like if you went from Mario to Dr. Mario, or even better yet, depending on what you do, Mario to Luigi. You know what I mean? They're very similar. They have a lot of similar properties, but they're very, 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 very different in a lot of notable ways. That's kind of how I like to think about key changes, especially if you actually do additional stuff to vary it up, or you do something wild the key change, like if you go up 6 semitones or down like 3 semitones or something like that. Like wild stuff like that tends to be really effective. Anyway, enough of that. We basically move on to the final drop, where it goes into the key of A major. Fun times. And of course, like I said, this one in particular drops into what is it? 3 different parts. We got the part A. Then we have part B, which is just this long, like it's basically a repeat of the intro, kind of not the intro, but the first drop. But it goes into halftime and all that cool stuff. And then finally we have the really cool, awesome ARP of the bass. This is like I don't know. I love this section. When I listen to it when I listen to the song myself, and I really get engrossed into this is a really easy way for me to do it. So. Like that last note is really the only thing I'll consider not a bass. It's so high up there, but it works. And it's what it sounded best to me, so whatever. But I love that. That's part C of the drop. Of the final drop. And then finally we have the 16 bars of outro. Yeah! Just kind of repeating outwards, so there you go. And that's basically the goals, elements, and arrangements. I hope you've enjoyed, because now we're going on to a sound design concept thing. So, fun times. Let's go. Alrighty, so for sound design, let's go ahead and get started with this. Now, like I said, we're going to be doing something a little bit different with the sound design in terms of talking about it compared to previous episodes of the series of how I made. Now, the thing that I want to take note of that I'm going to be talking about is basically how to actually incorporate sounds into the songs you're doing, and kind of what kind of idea you want to go about doing that. Because if you're a sound design focused musician in terms of doing like bass music and things like that, obviously you want to have a lot of interesting sounds. You're probably very good at incorporating those sounds. Well, however you do that, whether it's synthesizing your own stuff, resampling your stuff, all that good stuff. You're probably really good at making those sounds. But you kind of want to figure out, okay, how do I actually incorporate them? Well, the very simple thing is that you actually, like the thing that I tend to do, let me say it like this, and that I know some other artists do as well, like AE5, that we'll have sound design sessions about, we won't have the intention of necessarily making music, but we'll have the intention of designing sounds and just going into what we're ever going to do, and basically just kind of messing around with stuff, and we'll mess around with concepts or do different things and things like that. And that's kind of what all these sounds are a culmination of. Like, there's different sounds in here that have different purposes and things like that. And then there's some that basically that were just kind of like random accidents, And a lot of this stuff is essentially, like I said, it's just a culmination of that kind of idea. But you might think, okay, that's cool and all, CMO, that's cool, that's dope, but how do I actually incorporate them into my music? Well, essentially, I'm just going to simply say this. Just do it. Just do it, experiment, and see how it works. because the main thing you want to keep in mind when it comes to actually putting your sounds into music is that you have an idea of what sound you want, and you think, okay, I have this sound, and this sound probably best matches it up with this type of thing that I want to do, and that's kind of how I want to think about it. So, and that's kind of how I started out with the first drop with the song, when I wanted to say, okay, I really want to have like a really cool, like good sound design bass thing. Like that, like the almost Android sound, which is that little, like, the first bass you hear. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. That sound, like, initially when I had it in my mind, there was a different sound there. Like, there was something that was a little bit more growly or something like that, I think. But when I looked at my available sounds, like, yeah, there isn't really anything in particular. What else could fit here? And then I thought about, oh, almost Android's not a bad idea. So let me take that and modify it a little bit so that it fits the song a bit better. Because originally I think it's actually more of an ARP sound, I think. And basically, I just come up with that. Basically, you just fit it into the song, and then there you go. And that's kind of the core idea that you want to do when it comes to designing sounds. If you're the type of person that has sound design sessions and you don't make sounds up on the spot for your particular song. Now, that's kind of how I do it. That's kind of how a lot of other artists do it. But maybe you're the kind of person where, like, you can basically, like, you're kind of more like Seamless are, where you basically come up for your own original sounds on that particular project file itself, and you don't like you don't have like a sound design session or something like that. You don't, or at least don't tend to, and you just come up with sounds on the spot. He kind of does both, but he also seems to, at least from my perspective, being able to come up with sounds on the spot for that particular song. And that may be you, and for you, you're probably gonna have a little bit of a harder time trying to incorporate sounds, because when you make a sound, you're like, that doesn't sound as good as I want it to. But that's where you really should have a library of different sounds, just access that you can access and actually have, kind of manipulate on your whim. And that's kind of what I'd like to do with these patches. So that's kind of the core there. So a good example of that for me, like, if I wanted a resound, so I wanted to access I just wanted to access a resound. So I thought, okay, what resound can I use from there? Well, I want to use something with Serum, because Serum, it has more access to different rhythmic options and things like that. It can actually more easily do triplets. And so, okay, what I want to do there? Well, I figured, okay, well, I'm going to use this resound I have called Comb the Water from my Serum patches, and that's kind of what I'm thinking there. And that's basically what I did there. Just incorporated that into there, and that's pretty much it. So, and again, a lot of these sounds are just experiments and think, okay, that's a cool sound, I'm going to save that as a patch, and then I'll use that for a separate song later, and that's kind of what that was. So just keep that in mind. That's a lot of cool ideas there, and yeah. Featured bottles. There's a lot of, that's actually a resampled sound. I didn't realize it was resampled at all. But yeah, that's I don't know what else to say about that. Just do that kind of stuff, just have like a library of sounds. Go if you don't have an idea of what you want to make musically speaking, just simply go into it and say, alrighty, I want to make these sounds right here, or at least I want to try to make these kind of sounds with this kind of process. And just go into it, experiment, come up with cool sounds, record them, save them later as audio clips, save the patches later, and then once you actually have a solid idea of what you want to make musically speaking, you have some kind of background for sound design stuff that you want to incorporate into it, and that's kind of a good idea there. And that's just generally speaking how I do that. I can't, like, for me, I'm not a super huge sound design nerd and know all about my stuff. I know a few concepts here and there, and I know a few things about it, but I'm not like one of those Seamless R guys or AU5 guys or really even Virtual Riot guys where I can know a lot about how to design a sound and know the intricacies about how to make it. I just simply do it more by intuition. And for me, this works pretty well doing it like that. There's a few core concepts I do have down and I explain very well, but that's about it. And so for me, designing sounds on the whim, just not really thinking about it too much and just blasting out ideas, saving them later for separate projects. That's kind of like how I like to do that. So there you go. Now, that's basically what I really want to cover with the sound design, just that core concept right there of just simply designing sounds and incorporating them later into the songs. But that's kind of like there. However, some of you guys may be thinking to yourself, well, I want to know how you made this specific sound, or I want to know how you made this kind of thing work with this kind of sound design tool right here. Like you mentioned your sampled sounds, Simo. So why not simply talk about how you made this for sampled sound? Well, I don't really want to get into it because, like I said, it's kind of like a lot of times I don't even know what I'm doing when I'm doing it. So what I'm going to do instead, like I mentioned at the top of the video, is that if you want to have access to the project file and all these sounds all here, please just let me know. And I have no problem with doing that. And also, too, I will figure out a way for you guys to be able to buy and purchase these project files. I have yet to really work on a plan, or if there's even demand for it. But if there is a demand, I will meet it, and you guys will have access to the project files. So, and you have all the access into basically designing the sounds. So. And you can save the patches and things like that too if you really want to. So there you go. In any case though, hopefully you guys enjoyed this sound design aspect. We're going to go into the final part now, and that is the mixing and mastering. So, but heads up, not that much complicated with it. Excuse me, because I'm not going to be talking about too much with that. So there you go. Let's go. Alrighty, so we are now into the mixing and mastering phase. Now, mixing and mastering, I'm really not going to talk about how I did that in relation to this song, but I do want to make kind of a more of a PSA type of a thing, because typically with the mixing and mastering section, I highlight a specific idea in relation to mixing and mastering. Like I think in the past I've mentioned don't use a whole lot of reverb, and there's some other stuff where it's like, kind of varying up your sound, your side chain, or your ducking volume depending on how fast drums are, and time variables for stuff. I don't really want to mention any of that. Really, what I want to talk to you about actually is a little bit more of a I guess you could say a self-teaching type of thing, and something that will benefit you in the long run if you really are serious about music production, and that is essentially doing your own masters. Now, when I say doing your own masters, I literally mean don't have other people master your own tracks. Now, the reason why I say don't do that is not because it's particularly bad. It's really not that at all. I don't really think that matters, personally. Because there's a lot of good mastering engineers out there. One of the people that I'm involved with in a Discord server, he does mastering for other people when it comes to like not electronic music, but for rock, metal, and stuff like that. That's cool. But at the same time, though, this is like rock and metal, which is kind of more of a traditional method anyway. So yeah, it's not exactly the same thing. You create your own EDM house banger, and then you send it out for someone else to master, because a lot of the times the processes for how you would do a mastering in a more traditional genre versus something that's like more electronic based is vastly different, and what you're probably trying to aim for is also vastly different from that stuff too. Like, they all have their own versions of what sounds good for that specific genre, and so for unconventional genres like electronic music, you gotta do unconventional things, and one of those unconventional things may be for you, and I would strongly encourage you to do this, is to learn how to master your own stuff. I remember back in 2015, I really wanted to really, really, really learn how to nail down good solid master, something that a good solid mix and master, especially the mixing aspect, because even back then I kind of figured out that, okay, if I have a good mix, then the master is going to come stupidly easy, and I was completely right about that. And I think from about 2015 onward to maybe like 2016, 2017, I basically got it down. And I've been improving, a lot ever since then, of course, with just additional stuff like using what is it called? Like transient processors, and learning different aspects about how to do this and that and whatnot. And really, it's helped my game up a lot doing that. But I really wouldn't have gotten to that point if I just simply decided, I'm going to rely on other people to master my own tracks. That's just not where I would have been. I wouldn't have gotten so, like, at least decently good from 2015 to 2016 in about a year. Because if you listen to some tracks from like 2015 to 2016, go listen to my original version of Lost Mountains, like the original mix of Lost Mountains, and then go listen to my track Running from Dystopia. You'll both find them in the singles playlist, the singles music playlist, where it's basically just one song released. And listen to the quality difference with that. Massively different quality. It's so astounding how when I go back and listen to those tracks, it's like, dude, there's a huge gap here. And even then, the Running from Dystopia one, which is the better one, isn't exactly all that mind-blowing now to me either, because when I listen to my newest tracks, I'm still like, wow, this is as good as I thought it was. So, and I'm sure I feel the same way about tracks in 2020 and 2021 and stuff like that. And I'm sure there'll be something else that I learned that basically blows my current stuff out the water. And that's kind of just where I'm thinking about it. But again, I wouldn't have gotten to any of that point if I was like, I want to rely on other people to do that for me. And it's really this is really more of a thing for like people that are wanting to push the envelope for themselves and the skills that they require. There's a podcast guy I listen to, and have been for a while. It's more of a political thing, so if you're not interested in it, don't worry about it. But the podcast now is called Wealth, Power, and Influence, from a guy named Jason Stapleton. And a lot of the things he talks about in that is basically improving your own human capital and basically your knowledge and skill set. And I'm not exactly the kind of guy that wants to learn a whole lot of different things. I'm really not. I don't like trying out a whole lot of new things. I'm just not that interested in new things. I really, really love the stuff I love. I'm kind of just that kind of guy. I really like sticking with my own stuff, but the stuff I stick with, I love it to death. I mean, just look at my channel and the coverage of one particular video game, Conduit 2, and you'll see that clearly. Like, there's not a whole lot of the games that I typically play, but the games I do play, I'm obsessed with. And that's kind of how I am with that. But even with the stuff I'm obsessed with, there's some degree or another, I still want to learn how to do better, And it's gotten less so because I've hit more of a stride recently. But even still, if somebody wants to show me a new technique or something like that for how to improve myself, then yeah, definitely. I remember when I was on AU5's Discord server, and he mentioned something along the lines of basically time variables for your master, and introduced me to a technique, and well, really someone else, but I kind of learned it as well from when he was talking to the guy, basically talking about how to find the fastest time variables for your particular song. And that was really key dependent, and a little bit of calculation with it. But once I figured out how to do it, it brought my game up once again. And it's just stuff like that. You want to learn stuff like that when it comes to mixing and mastering, because again, you want to do it yourself. If you know how to do more things when it comes to this, especially the mixing and mastering, you won't have to worry about paying somebody else to do your own stuff. You could easily do for yourself for free. And on top of that, you can do it in a way that's more specific for how you want to do it. And at the end of the day, too, even if you're the kind of person that wants to render out stems and not do it all within the project file, which there are reasons for doing that. I'm not saying there isn't. But if you're even the person that wants to do that, you can do that yourself. You can do stem mastering yourself. You don't have to worry about other people doing it for you, and you don't have to worry about all those complications and you don't have to worry about, taking 2 weeks just for you to be able to get like a freaking thing. We could probably do it in like a couple days at the most. So, there you go. That's kind of where I want to leave that though. Like I said, just do your own masters. Like you like just do your own masters. I don't just learn about it. There's a lot of tutorials out there. How I personally learned how to do my own mastering was from Seamless Art, and he basically has his own video on how he does mastering and mixing and things like that, and that's just kind of how that works. So there you go. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this part, in this final part of this basically long video of how I made Take a Minute here. So there you go. Fun times indeed. And yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. More content coming along the way. Next week Friday, you will find another version of, another episode of this. I have not decided the song yet, but there will be another one of this. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Again, let me know about that project file thing if you want to end up purchasing project files for sound design and other stuff like that. And yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye. Yay.